So this creeping succulent plant is known as Kalanchoe uniflora, and uniflora just means one flower, which is why it's typical to start to put out 1 or 2 or 3 flowers towards the end of one of these stems. Now, this is my second attempt at growing this plant because initially I was growing it in my southwest facing windows, very similar to my other Kalanchoe, which are typically really resilient plants. But for whatever reason, I find this one to be a little bit more temperamental, and it doesn't really love to be touched. It's kind of like my Ficus lyrata. Like, you don't want to bump into that thing or else it'll just like turn brown. The same thing with this one. If you bump into it, I'm always finding like I would break a stem, which is no biggie because honestly, that's like the best way to propagate this is just to cut it. And sometimes it'll have like little aerial roots. Like you could see that this one just kind of broke off right here. But you'll see like these little aerial roots, and if you actually just stick this kind of on top of a drier potting medium, it would just root right back up. So even though it's temperamental in that way, it'll actually root up really easily. Now, right here, this has the growing medium. So I actually ended up getting this from Steve's Leaves. And like I said, this is my second attempt at being able to grow this. This is one of those things where you don't want this to be too moist, or you actually want to get a little bit more airflow in order to be able to dry this out, because this plant is growing a little bit more as an epiphyte, and it needs to dry out a little bit more, or it'd be great like in rocks, epipetrically, you know, growing in rocks and crags of rocks and just kind of creeping along. So you just want to be a little bit more mindful that even though the grower might be actually growing it in a regular grower's mix and giving it like perfect conditions, when you bring it in your home, you might want to try to recreate a little bit more of this plant's native habitat. I should say that this is actually native to Madagascar. You would see it probably in a little bit more kind of cliff areas and along rocks. Probably make a really great rock garden plant as well, but I don't think that it's really that cold hardy, so I wouldn't be growing it in a rock garden, for instance, here in the Northeast. There's much more hardier succulents that you could probably use for that, and ones that don't always like break off if you clip them. But I will have to say that the way that I think this is growing well now is under a little bit more of a grow light towards my northeast facing window. So again, not giving it such an intense light, so I'd say bright kind of indirect light is going to be perfect for this plant, even though I think it could actually handle a little bit more of the highlight condition. But the challenge and the issue might actually be the grower's medium that you're growing it in. So if you're giving it high light and I'm watering it and it's a bit more of a peaty mix, it's probably getting and holding on to a lot of water and kind of rotting these semi-succulent stems. So that's why I'd probably say that it would do better in my southwest facing window. And again, this is just like a guess of mine if I'm growing it in a little bit more of an airier mix. But I just didn't want to try to separate the stems from the grower's medium because, like I said, if you knock it, it just kind of like falls off, and that's a shame. So I was very ginger bringing this over to the setup in order to be able to talk about it. But otherwise, I really love this plant. I love Kalanchoes as succulents, and the fact that this one is a little bit more of a trailing hanging basket type makes it really interesting to me.